Welcome to the Motor City Sports Podcast, your new home for discussing our Detroit sports. I am your host, Lee Mosierak, and I want to thank all of you for being with me on this new venture. I had a dream that we could discuss sports in a positive, fun, happy way, the way that sports were meant to be discussed. And that's what I'm doing here. I've seen the way a lot of national and local sports talking heads have approaches. It's very hostile, very negative, very loud, and I just don't enjoy it. But I've also seen the way that some select few local and national guys have approached this in more of a positive way, trying to interject the fun back into sports. And that's the wave that I want to be a part of. Seeing that in some programs around the country and around locally, a few, but mostly around the country, that's given me some hope that we can talk about this in a positive way. And that's what I want to do. Sports are supposed to be fun. So I'm hoping to bring that fun back with this podcast. I want to talk about Detroit sports in a way that's fun and exciting. I want to talk to fellow fans, current athletes, local legends, really anyone that remembers that sports are supposed to be fun. And that's what we're going to do here. So if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening wherever you get your podcasts, I want to thank you for being with us at the very beginning of this. This show is going to grow. It's going to get better and better as we move forward. We're already making improvements. If you were here last week, you saw all we had were a couple of these frames above my head here on the desk. We're starting to surround it. We've got 4 old Sports Illustrateds with different Tigers on the cover. We have a couple Tigers t-shirts that I've got framed over my shoulders here, and we're going to keep filling this out more and more. Right now, it's mostly Tigers gear if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, you don't really have the visual aid for this, but it's going to grow to more Piston stuff, Lion stuff, Red Wing stuff, maybe even collegiate things as well. But again, this is the ground floor, and you're all a part of it. So if you were with us last week, again, thank you for your support. During last week's episode, we tackled the Tigers. We looked at how real the Tigers really are and discussed if the national media is taking them seriously and if local media is taking them seriously. Not even so much media, just people in general, people around the country and people locally. Do they think the Tigers are the real deal? And we discussed that quite a bit, and I firmly believe Tigers are the real deal. We also talked about the Pistons a little bit. Admittedly, that section was a little dated last week because I recorded it 4 days before it was released, and during that 4 days, all the free agency chaos happened. So a lot of moves were made with the Pistons last week, and we'll discuss that later today, actually. But on last week's episode, we dove into that a little bit. We talked about the Arena Football 1 championship game and that it starred a local Detroit native. Tyler Kolko was a starting quarterback for one of the teams in that game. And at the end of the episode last week, we did a deep dive on the Tarik Skubal situation that's looking the Tigers dead in the eyes. And we're going to talk about Tarik Skubal again today. That first episode, thank you guys so much for being there. I know I had a few bumps, some editing snafus here or there, some of the topics being a little bit dated, but it's going to be fun, I think, as we move forward. That was episode 1. Here's episode 2. We're going to try to get these things out every Monday and Thursday as we move forward here. So we got a great show for you today. What kind of week did the Tigers have? So we're going to look at last week, Sunday through Saturday. They just started off July. How did they start? We're going to look at the Pistons again. We're going to really look at those moves they made last week, and did they do enough to make themselves more competitive in that Eastern Conference of the NBA? And a local sports reporting legend got me a little fired up about this whole Tarik Skubal thing again. So we will talk more about that on today's episode of the Motor City Sports Podcast. Before we get started, though, I need to let everyone know that today's episode is brought to you by Grosse Pointe Spine Center, where they use non-surgical spinal decompression to treat patients suffering from chronic neck pain, chronic back pain, and sciatica caused by herniated discs, bulging discs, and degenerative disc disease. If you're in the Metro Detroit area and you're in need of pain relief, call them at 313-332-0388 or visit online at grossepointspinecenter.com. All right, without any further ado, let's get into today's topics. So starting off, we're going to start with the Tigers. We're going to recap last week. So as I record this right now, they're finishing up Game 3 with the Cleveland Guardians. I had to hit pause on the game and get recording, but I'm going to kind of recap the Sunday through Saturday anyway. And so today's game will be reviewed on a video later this week. But pretty good first week of July, well, last day of June in through July. They started off that big Sunday night game last week on ESPN where Tarik Skubal was dominant. They got the win. They unfortunately lost the series against the Nationals, went 1-2 in the middle of the week, and then they're 2-0 so far against Cleveland this week in 2 real tight games. So they went 4-2 over the week. Those national games at the time might have seemed frustrating, but 4-2 is great. That gives us a 667 winning percentage on the week, and we know any team would love to have that on a season. So why not take it over the week. A couple of things I want to look at as far as how last week went. Again, played 6 games, 4-2. Some of the things that really jumped out to me, Skubal had a great game last Sunday on Sunday Night Baseball ESPN. He's currently pitching a great game against Cleveland until I hit pause on it. Casey Mize, another great game. Both those guys threw 7 strong innings. Skubal only allowed 1 hit last week with 13 strikeouts and a walk. Casey, 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks. Other important note about Casey Mize is his ERA has not been above 3 all year. So he hasn't gone in flukes. He's been solid and dependable the whole year. Records now at 9-2. So he and Tarik Skubal are really one heck of a two-headed monster to take the top of this pitching rotation. So I love to see that. A couple of things that popped out. Reese Olson had a good return. Didn't get through 5 full innings, but he was solid enough. Did enough to kind of keep us in there, keep us the game. Bullpen came in, took care of the rest of that game. And our 4th win last week was a bullpen day where all the guys did great. And so those are our 4 wins. Jack pitched the game, a little rocky, but not too terrible. Unfortunately, Dietrich had a real rough game on his 2nd game with the Tigers. So we'll look to see if he bounces back on a future start. But pitching was great last week. A couple of the other highlights I want to touch on. Spencer Torkelson has just been incredible. The resurgence continues. I know the beginning of the year, at one point, his OPS was above 1,000. He started out real strong. We've seen the batting average dip a little bit as the season's gone on, but that's okay. He's going to still hit for power. He's going to hit the home runs. He plays phenomenal defensive first base. I always thought it was kind of strange that they were looking to move him out of there, move Colt over, and maybe just use Spencer as a DH at the beginning of the year, because I think defensively he saves a lot of guys. He might misplay a ball here or there as he's fielding the ball, but the amount of balls he digs out of the dirt, comes off the bag and gets the tag on bad throws, he saved the Tigers infielders from a lot of errors over the last couple of years. So I'm glad to see him kind of get back in and be, for the most part, that regular first baseman, because he's phenomenal at it. But the last week's been great. And maybe he's coming out of that all-star voting a little upset that he didn't get more of the fan vote. But just in that Sunday to Saturday stretch, he was 8 for 24. So, that would be a 333 batting average. Obviously, that's great. But for a week, 8 for 24 is great. And 3 home runs. And they were big home runs. Last night's game, or Saturday night's game as this is coming out, only run of the game. And so he's been huge for the last week. And I think he's really continuing to prove the coaching staff right in not giving up on him. We've heard the story a number of times during telecasts that when he got sent down last year, AJ Hinch was calling him all the time just to let him know, hey, we're not giving up on you. We're here for you. You're going to get better. This is yours. They were straight up and honest with him when the Gleyber Torres signing happened and said, hey, look, we're probably going to move Colt over to first. We want to see what you can do this spring training. And they gave him a real serious chance to keep himself on this team and keep himself in the lineup. And he has not let anyone down. Would we love to see him batting 300? Of course, but that's not modern baseball. So if he hits around 230 or even maybe 240 and he hits 40 home runs over 100 RBI this year, who's going to turn that down? And I just hit yesterday, I believe that was his 20th home run he hit. So he's just shy of a 40 home run pace, but he's close. So yeah, 8 for 24 last week for Spencer, 3 home runs. Great week. Colt Keith's done a great job on that leadoff position. 7 for 17 the last week, 411. I'm still a bit of an old soul, so I really wished that Parker could have come back and locked down that leadoff position. I just love the idea of like that speedy center fielder leading off, getting on. I had this like dream lineup of Parker, Gleyber, Riley, Torque, Carpenter, Dingler, Colt, Javi, McKinstry, I believe, was my little dream lineup. I'm just doing off the top of my head. Nobody had that perfect left, right, all the way down the lineup. I just love the way that looked. We could still, in theory, do that. Now we just can flip Colt and Parker. But Colt's done a great job getting leadoff. Sees a lot of pitches, which, again, old school guy me, I love that. This is the leadoff hitter is not just popping up in the first pitch. So he sees a lot of pitches. And then with the usual lineup of Colt and then Gleyber sees a lot of pitches. And we've heard over and over how this Tigers team sees more pitches in the first inning than any other team in baseball. It feels like every game the Tigers see 20 pitches in that first inning, just making the other pitcher work to get out of there. So that's great. Colt's done great. 7 for 17 last week, 411 for the week. So he's been great. I love it. Great to see. A couple other highlights for the week. Zach McKinstry, 6 for 22 on the week. Now, a lot of that came in the one game, right? He had 4 hits in that one game, had a home run, but overall, 6 for 22, a 272 average on a week. Not bad. That's right around what his average is. So I'm glad to see that. He had a tough game at one point in the week, couple errors in that one inning. Javi had an error in that same inning. That was just a weird game. But it's great to see Zach. He had the 4 hits in the one game. I think he had a home run a couple games later. So that was the game after the couple errors. So great week for Zach. I love seeing that, and I'll repeat this a lot. I think I'll do a deep dive on this maybe next week. But as some of this Bregman talk gets brought up again, I read a couple articles that there's a chance Tigers might go for him, and I'm just not interested now. I was really interested in the offseason about making a push for Bregman, and that was when I didn't even think McKinstry would be the stud that he's turned out to be. At the time, I thought, yeah, let's go for Bregman. That'd be great. If we don't get him, okay, we'll have Vierling. And then we didn't get him. I thought, we have Vierling. Whatever, we'll move forward. Vierling gets hurt. I get a little nervous thinking, ooh, gosh, I wish we had Bregman. But Zach stepped up. That third base is a weird position. Javi was playing it. Andy Ibanez was playing it. And Zach, for the most part, has done a great job. The cool thing about Zach is he's a utility guy. He can go anywhere. So if we did get Bregman, I guess you could put him somewhere else, but there's not a lot of holes. I'm happy with what we have, and I'm glad that Zach continues to perform well enough, I think, to keep the front office away from doing anything crazy with any in-season trades. Last one I want to touch on for the week offensively is Riley Green. So not the greatest week for Riley, but he had a couple really awesome games. That Sunday night game on ESPN, it was kind of a perfect little demonstration for the rest of the country to see. Tarik Skubal throws this great game. Riley Green hits a home run. Kind of the two players that the rest of the country knows about, and they performed on the national spotlight. Riley Green had another game this week where he hit 2 home runs, but those were his only 3 hits. So he's had 3 for 21 this week. We keep seeing over and over how much he struggles against Cleveland, and obviously Friday, Saturday night, 2 Cleveland games. So hopefully he's able to bounce out of that here as we go into next week against Tampa, because he's just too important of a player for the Tigers for him to not get as many hits as he's capable of getting. Tarik Skubal, a couple things I want to point out with him, and we'll talk about Skubal a little bit later, but his year is just incredible. So I saw a couple of things this week. One, his last 15 starts, again, not including the third game this weekend against Cleveland, because I'm recording this during the Cleveland game. This is kind of everything through his Sunday night game last week on ESPN. So through a 15-start stretch, because remember at the beginning of the year, the first 2 games weren't great. He was fine, but he wasn't the Tarik Skubal we all know. So throw those first 2 games out for a minute. The next 15 starts has just been crazy. 1.74 ERA, 128 strikeouts, only 10 walks. And then when you compare 2024 to 2025, in 2024, at the first 17 starts, he was 9-3. He had a 2.45 ERA, a .93 WHIP. He'd thrown 103 innings, 119 strikeouts. And he went on to win the Cy Young. From this point forward of last year, he was the best pitcher. Everyone knew the Cy Young was basically wrapped up. This year, even better. So during the first 17 starts, again, including those 2 starts that weren't great, first 17 starts, he's 10-2 this year as opposed to 9-3 last year. He's at a 2.15 ERA as opposed to the 2.45 last year, a .83 WHIP as opposed to the .93 last year, 109 innings pitched this year as opposed to 103. So he's getting a few more innings in. 138 strikeouts this year as opposed to last year's 119. So even better this year, even stronger. As long as there's no voters fatigue, he has a really good shot at getting Cy Young again, potentially even getting some MVP votes. So just an incredible year for Tarik Skubal, an incredible start. A couple of things that I want to talk about as far as on the negative side of the Tigers this weekend. I don't harp too much on negative. That's not the way I go about watching my Tigers baseball or really any of my Detroit sports. But 2 things. One, the Kerry Carpenter injury. That's a bummer. He's on the injured list now. That same hamstring that's been bothering him for a while. I was at one of the playoff games last year against Cleveland, and in the stadium, you don't get much information. So his next time to bat comes up and he's not in the lineup. I'm trying to get online to see what's going on, and he'd been pulled because of his hamstring. That's bit him a couple times this year, and that seems to be the issue. So hopefully the training staff's able to get him back on the field, get him healthy, get him back soon, and it's not a very long-term thing. Good thing is we've got guys that can fill in those holes. Once Perez gets a few more at-bats, gives Vierling a few more spots that he can play. So there's guys we can fill in there, but we're going to need Carpenter for a late season rush here. We want Carpenter in the lineup when we're going into September and October. The other thing is the Gleyber Torres injury from Saturday night. They were saying in Sunday's broadcast that it's not serious It looked pretty scary when it happened. He takes that forearm or that elbow into the neck, kind of throws his whole head back a little bit early on in that game Saturday. But they are saying it's just a precautionary, him out of the lineup. He'll be fine, shouldn't linger around long term. So that's good news. Other real kind of the bummer of the week would be the Dietrich Enns game this week. I was really excited after his debut the week before. He threw so great and really struggled this week. 4 innings, 8 hits, 7 runs, only 3 strikeouts. So I'll be interested to see kind of what happens moving forward, if he's able to bounce back to the way that first game was, or if it becomes a thing where as teams get more tape on him, because he'd been gone for 3 years. So as teams start to get him on tape and they can study it, maybe they've figured out how to hit him. And that first game was more the blip on the radar versus the second game. But I'm hopeful that for the positive that he'll continue to be strong and be a good addition to this staff, because the more good arms we can have, the better, because the injury bug is not afraid to bite this team. A lot of these guys have been down with some injuries. So as many good, strong arms as we can have ready to go, the better. Just going to wrap up our first topic on the Detroit Tigers. Great start to July, 4-2 here for the last week. Hopefully today's Sunday's game, they get off another win. And we'll see kind of how this next week goes as we lead into the All-Star break. So coming up after this break, we're going to dive into the Detroit Pistons. How did last week's start to free agency go? Did they do enough to stay competitive in the Eastern Conference of the NBA? So we'll be right back on the Motor City Sports Podcast after this break. Welcome back to the Motor City Sports Podcast. I am your host, Lee Mojurak, and I want to thank all of you for joining me again today on our second episode of this new positive, fun look at our Detroit sports. In the second part of the show here, I want to start by talking about the Detroit Pistons and how last week went. So on the debut episode, I talked a little bit about that when I recorded this. The Malik Beasley news had just come down, and we were kind of theorizing or hypothesizing what might happen with that. Potential free agent moves that might happen with the Pistons. And then 2 days later, all the free agency moves happened. And so I felt kind of silly releasing a podcast on Thursday with a bunch of new information out there when my podcast was a little dated. But hey, that's going to come with the ropes here. A few bumps along the way, and I'm okay with that. So what did the Pistons do last week? We knew heading into the offseason there were kind of 3 big names: Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, and Malik Beasley. So they were going in as the free agents that we potentially wanted to re-sign. So which guys were going to come back, which guys were not going to come back. All reports out there seem to indicate the Pistons were ready to give Malik Beasley a pretty big contract, potentially overpay because of the emotional excitement that he brings to the Pistons. I think Malik Beasley knew that his value is more at the Pistons than anywhere else. And the Pistons kind of knew that too, but I think they were almost willing to play ball. Everyone watching the Pistons games loved him. Malik Beasley came into the lineup. He did his thing. He got a couple fired off a couple threes, quick threes in transition. It became kind of an attitude of the Pistons team, and we like to see that. So is he worth the number they were throwing around or potentially paying him? Maybe not. Would he have gotten that on any other team? Maybe not. But the Pistons knew that he meant something to this team, and they were willing to kind of pay for that. And then all the news broke last week of the investigation, and obviously that offers off the table. So Pistons will not be pursuing Malik Beasley, so he's kind of out of the picture. A lot of the news looks pretty grim that he may not be back in the NBA. He might be looking at more serious consequences than a suspension or a fine. So the other 2 big guys, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder. So last year, Tim Hardaway Jr. played 77 games with the Pistons, averaged 11 points, about 2.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists a game. So he was a good contributor, especially after the Jaden Ivey injury. Tim stepped up, played a really pivotal role. Good shooter, hit from the outside, pretty big guy to have in there. But free agency, so what were they going to pay for him? And it looks like they didn't really pursue him much at all. He's signing a 1-year deal with the Nuggets. So we're going to lose Tim Hardaway Jr., we're going to lose Malik Beasley. And then the Dennis Schroeder, same kind of thing. He came in late, was a late addition. He played on several teams last year, but he fit right in. He seemed to be a Piston through and through, seemed to really love playing for Detroit. And it was great to see him out there. But again, as free agency looms, is someone going to pay him more than the Pistons are willing to pay him? And that became the truth. Kings were willing to give him a 3-year deal. And now there's talk of the sign and trade. And as of recording of this, there has not been a name released if there's a guy the Pistons are getting back. But with losing Dennis Schroeder, he played 28 games with us last year, averaged just under 11 points, about 2.5 rebounds, just over 5 assists. So it's a contributing player. The Pistons had a pretty deep squad. It wasn't just the starting five and then two guys that got some playing time. There was a solid nine, sometimes 10 guys that would get reasonable playing time. And Dennis was certainly one of those guys. So if we're going to lose three of our nine highest contributing players, we've got to fill that void with something, right? And that's what the team has done. So the first big shoe to drop was the draft. Chaz Lanier, getting him, and we've talked about this. I've talked about this on last week's podcast. I talked about it on a video that right on draft night. Was that it did seem very much like the Pistons front office knew retaining Beasley and Hardaway wasn't going to happen. Maybe they'd retain one of them, so they needed to replace losing one shooter with getting another shooter, and that seems to be what they did in drafting Chaz Lanier, who again at Tennessee last year played 38 games, averaged 18 points, about 3.5 rebounds, and right around 1 assist and 1 steal. So at the college level, pretty good numbers. Hoping that translates to the NBA. It's not going to be immediate. I don't think he's going to be a guy we see step on the court on opening night and just shoots the lights out. But once he kind of gets the NBA figured out, he's going to be a guy that can come in off the bench, hit some shots, and that's what this team needs, because this team, I think, more and more as we move forward, is going to play a lot of Cade Cunningham, ball dominant, and if the defense collapses on him, he's going to kick the ball out, and someone needs to make a shot. Then we've got, Duran or Isaiah Stewart underneath to kind of get the tip back if we need to. But we've got to have shooters surrounding Cade, and hopefully Chaz is going to be one of those. Speaking of shooters, Duncan Robinson leaving Miami for the first time of his career. So last year with Miami, he played 74 games, 11 points, about 2.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists. That was actually a little lower than I thought in my head. I feel like every time I've seen a Heat game, he hits 4 threes. I just feel like it's a given. He's always making shots. So adding him to the Pistons, I think, is great. He fills that void being left with Tim Hardaway going and Malik Beasley not returning. I think he'll do a great job. They signed him 3 years, $48 million. Interesting contract. As that more details have come out, we've discovered that it's not a fully guaranteed 3 years. It really seems like it's a 1 year. It reminds me of an NFL contract. That the first year is guaranteed, that second year is partially guaranteed, and the third year is not at all. So this could be a 1 year deal with Duncan Robinson, see how he fits in. And then potentially, if it doesn't work, we say goodbye to him, we move on. But I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that he's going to fit in, that he's going to do a great job. We lose Fontecchio in that deal, but he wasn't playing a ton anyway. So getting Duncan Robinson in that kind of trade or that sign and trade deal, I think works perfect for the Pistons. And the other big pickup was Karis LeVert. Now that hits me right in my soul, right in the feels. I'm a University of Michigan graduate, so I enjoyed having Tim Hardaway Jr. on the team last year. Getting Karis LeVert is fun. He played 64 games last year for Atlanta and Cleveland, averaged roughly between the two teams about 12 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. So a nice solid guy to come in off the bench, which is what the Pistons need. Their starting lineup's pretty secure, right? We've got Cade Cunningham, obviously NBA superstar. He's going to be the face of this league, or face of the team for sure, potentially the face of the league. Jaden Ivey coming back from injury, which I'm really excited to see how now that they're healthy and we've got really Cade blossoming into the player we all knew he would be, how Jaden fits working in alongside of him. Asar Thompson and Tobias Harris, and then Jalen Duran. So as I've mentioned last week, I had this thought all while watching the Pistons last year. Gosh, when Jaden Ivey comes back, Cade, Jaden, and Jalen are going to be a legitimate big three. And then having Tobias in there as that veteran, Arsard is playing crazy defense, flying all over the court. This is a real legitimate starting five. So I was really excited to see what would happen when we get Jaden Ivey back. And then you look at the guys on the bench. It's just such a deep team. Isaiah Stewart, we saw how important he was to the team last year. Him going down with injury in the playoffs was terrible. It was almost like there was no recovery from that. And so getting him back, getting him healthy is going to be huge. And then as well, we've got Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson, the new guys. Chaz Lanier, who we just drafted, and Ron Holland, I think, is going to have a real pivotal role on this team. Now another year seasoned. He's not just a new guy anymore. He's a great hustle guy on defense, got such a motor. And in 81 games last year, he averaged over 6 points, almost 3 rebounds, about an assist a game. And so he was a serious player on this team. And I think this year he's going to get more of an opportunity to have even more of a role. That's 10 guys I named there that we can easily run out there. And that's a deep squad. That's as deep as anyone in the NBA. And so I think we're looking forward to a really great year. I don't know how much news we're going to get here in the next couple of weeks. This might be my last time to talk about the Pistons for right now. But we'll kind of dive more into this as this offseason goes on, as the summer goes. Any new news comes up, we'll revisit again. But for now, I think the Pistons had a good week. Good start to free agency. They said goodbye to a few guys that they had to say goodbye to, and they welcomed guys who do more than fill in those roles. So I think we're in a really good spot as Detroit Pistons fans, and I'm really excited to see what happens next year as we start the next season. All right, so that wraps up topic 2, the Detroit Pistons. After this break, we'll dive back into a little bit of Tigers, a little bit of Tarik Skubal, but specifically, how did a local legend sports reporter get me fired up about Tarik Skubal all over again? We'll talk about that on Motor City Sports Podcast right after this break. Welcome back to the Motor City Sports Podcast. I am your host, Lee Mosierak, and we are diving into our third topic of the week. So I watched a couple of videos this week. Lynn Henning, a legend, local sports reporter, Detroit News, has covered Detroit sports forever, knows more about this stuff than I or most people could ever dream of knowing. He was on with the Woodward Sports guys, and they were talking about a couple of things facing the Detroit Tigers as we move forward here. And they got going on the Tarik Skubal situation again. And it got me a little fired up again. He made the point that there's no way the Tigers are going to be able to extend him. That there's no way Boris is going to accept that. And I said that last week. I said that, I'd heard from a couple places that potentially we're looking at a 10-year, $400 million or $415, I think was one number, is what it would take to extend Skubal. And I said, if he'll take that, sign it now. Like, what are we waiting for? But I didn't think there'd be any way Boris would take that because he's going to push it as far down as he can. He's going to get every last dollar. He knows Tarik Skubal is not suddenly going to turn into a terrible pitcher. So he knows the longer he waits, the more money he can get. And Lynn said the same thing, that they're going to push this further and further down the road. So anything the Tigers offer is basically pointless. But he went one step further, kind of saying that we should be okay with that. And there's no reason basically for the Tigers to pay what it would take. So it's going to probably take $500 million. I think that's what Boris is going to go for. He's going to look for the big clickbait number, 10 years, $500 million. He wants his guy to get that as a pitcher. And we're going to be looking at that in about a year and a half. And that's scary. I talked last week about the Miguel Cabrera contract that was signed, 15 years ago, or whatever it was, that made it so we had a good solid Miggy for 5 years, but then we were going to have an aging, a little slower Miggy for the final 5 years. And Dombrowski made the point then that that's what it took. We wanted Miguel Cabrera. That was the price. And my point now is kind of the same with Tarik Skubal. If we want Tarik Skubal, there's a price for that. We've waited around during this rebuild. We got the good guys. We got the good pitchers. We were patient with the front office as we were told there was a plan. We've seen that plan work and getting the best pitcher in baseball. We need to re-sign him. We need to extend him. We need to lock him up. And that might take a little bit of money. So the way I look, I think we're all looking at this a little backwards. And so we're looking at it like, oh my gosh, if we sign him when he's 30 years old for a 10-year contract, we're going to be paying a 40-year-old $50 million a year. And that's insane. There's no way anyone should want that. And I agree. No one wants that. No fan wants that. No owner definitely wants that to sign up for that. But I think that's a backwards way of looking at it. The way I look at it is we paid $2.5 million for a Cy Young Triple Crown winning Tarik Skubal. And this year we're paying basically $10 million for a better version of that Cy Young Triple Crown winning Tarik Skubal. So at the end of all that, we're just going to walk away. We're going to fold. We're going to cash out and say, see you later. That makes no sense to me. It's time to then do the right thing as an organization and make a reasonable offer to him to keep him a Detroit Tiger. We need him to stay a Detroit Tiger. I've even heard people, though, this makes me so. So Lynn, to his credit, when he was talking about this, he said, hey, the Tigers are going to make a good offer. Boris is going to say no. It's going to get to free agency. It's going to be some ridiculous number. There's no way the Tigers can do. So they're going to have to walk away. But the good news is after all that, we'll get a pretty good draft pick back for that. So we've done a good job of draft picks lately. We rebuild. We go from there. If that happens, okay. If the Tigers make a good offer and take this seriously and it's all just Boris and Skubal saying no, fine. I'll take it. I'll be appreciative of the time we had. I'll wish him all the best, and we'll move forward. But not offering anything when it comes to that would drive me crazy. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're just going to wash their hands of this. They're going to make a good offer. They did the same thing with Bregman. All the reports came out in the offseason. They tried hard with Bregman, just didn't line up. Again, Scott Boras, same deal. So I was fine with that. Moving on. If that happens with Tarik Skubal, I'll be happy. Move forward. But any talk of trading him before his contract is up makes me want to fly through a roof. It's insane. I've heard way too many people say, we can't let him walk for nothing. Like Lynn pointed out, we're not letting him walk for nothing. If he walks at the end of all this, we'll still get something back in a draft pick or whatever. But even if he walked for nothing, I don't care. We're trying to win now. We've got a team set up to win a World Series this year or next year. There is I can't imagine a scenario in which July of 2026, the Tigers are sitting in first place, 10 games ahead of whoever again, and the Tigers just panic and think, well, we're not going to re-sign Tarik, so we might as well trade him for pieces, and we trade away our best guys or making a World Series push. That's the dumbest take I can possibly imagine. So that should not happen, should not be taken seriously. And so I can get behind what Lynn's saying, that, hey, we're going to make an offer. $500 million is probably too much. And even personally, I probably agree with that. If I saw they signed 10-year 500, I might get a little squeamish. But I would still go back to, we paid $12 million, 12 and a half, maybe $13 million for these 2 years of Tarik Skubal that I read those stats earlier. That has been ridiculous numbers. So if that means we have to eat it a little bit in 12 years or 9 years, then maybe we need to be okay with that. We need to do the right thing. So 500 over 10 years, probably too much, but do the right thing. Make a serious offer, make a serious attempt at retaining Tarik Skubal, the best pitcher we've developed since Justin Verlander, and then I'm happy. And as I mentioned last week, maybe it becomes a thing where we do the right thing, we sign Tarik Skubal, and then 3-4 years, maybe then we trade him away if we have to. But we take this seriously now. We make a push. We don't let this guy walk. It would really bum me out if we don't do the right thing. The reason I wanted to bring this back up because now we're starting to hear 500. A few weeks ago, the number was 400. And like I said on last week's podcast, 400 never seemed reasonable. I always thought it was going to be more than that. Scott Boras loves to say that, oh yeah, we're listening to offers. We'll extend now if you want, but he's never going to take an offer seriously until his client is a free agent and he can fill up the entire market and there's not going to be a hometown discount. So maybe Tarik convinces his agent to take $1 million less to stay at the Detroit Tigers. I don't see it happening. But don't walk away early. We got 17 more months of Tarik Skubal. We have 1.5 years left of Tarik Skubal. This team is great. We keep him at the front of that rotation. We keep him shutting down opponents. We keep doing the right thing. And if in 1.5 years he walks away, fine. If in a year we've got a World Series and we're looking for another World Series, fine. I get it. Players don't last forever. We need to improve rosters, constantly have turnover. That's fine. But do the right thing for now, make the right offer, and let's see how this shakes out. Okay, so that's going to do it for our second episode of the Motor City Sports Podcast. Again, I want to thank all of you for being along for the ride, for being here in episode 1, and being here in episode 2. We've got lots more fun coming. We're going to try to release these every Monday and Thursday, and we're going to have some interviews as we move forward as well, but we're going to have a bit of a recap of Detroit sports. We'll start talking about a little national news as we move forward as well, but right now there's so much going on with the Tigers and the Pistons draft is happening that there's plenty enough to talk about when it comes to just Detroit that we don't have to look at the national spotlight. So again, thank everyone for joining us. We'll be right back here on Thursday for another episode of the Motor City Sports Podcast. Thanks, guys.